talk about the external facade, and that this is, I guess, the material aspect of the relationship, as far as I understand. So, what you do, how you interact with your partner, what you feel towards them, and stuff like that. I guess that would be kind of the external facade, like our idea of what they are.
The external facade is the expectation of some kind of demonstration of feelings. And very often we emphasize the facade rather than the actual feelings because we believe then that if people do what we expect them to do, like we expect them to bring us flowers, we expect them to cook for us, we expect them to clean for us, and so on and so forth. So when we get all that, what we supposedly consider as love, or we want to receive as the symbol of love, that this is the way to prove us that we're actually in a love relationship. But love, the relationship, is so much more than just a facade. And very often people just hide behind the facade. They think that if they do some things, if they give certain things, then they ensure that they will get love, or they will get comfort, or they will get security, or they will get appreciation. And again, they consider that as love. But true love is like is a spontaneous dive into the space of unconditional being when there is absolute equanimity. And this equanimity is sort of, it's fulfilling and empty at the same time. You can't describe it. That's why very often people who are in love, they say they can't explain it. It's just a flow. It's just a flow where they feel absolutely connected with the entire existence, with the world. And in that moment they feel no separation. They feel everything is right, everything is fine. And so this feeling certainly cannot be sustained because, first of all, our system is not supportive of this feeling, and the mundanity and all these things that we have to take care of in life, they kind of take over the feeling. But again, this feeling is like it's always there. It's the existence itself, and so you can't call it a facade, because when you dive into that feeling, it's unconditional, but you can always project it on someone, or maybe someone invokes it, but after all it's you who feels it. So because it's unconditional in a way, but usually very often we want to project it because someone maybe invoked it, so we connect it with that being, because we can't cultivate it within ourselves. So we need that stimulation of connection to cultivate it within ourselves, or to experience it simply. It's like going into meditation. At first, it seems like you're going into a meditation, but at the end, you realize there is no meditation, there is just a being. And you thought you were going into meditation only because you couldn't sustain that feeling for a long time. But with time, and with further refinement, you see that this is always there. That's why you see that every action is like soaked in that being, or that being is permeates through all the actions. And so the same goes with love. Love is the being, love is contentment. It's all the same. It's just one and the same reality, ultimate reality, which we interpret as this or that because we feel so overwhelmed, blissful, unconditional. Once we just kind of absorbed away from that projected world. And so it can be invoked by people, this ultimate reality, through, as we say, some kind of a love that is mutual, which kind of returns us to the essence of self. Or it can be invoked through just simply being by yourself and letting go of everything in that particular moment, and just letting yourself dive into the space of self and experience the essence, the nature of own consciousness, unconditional consciousness. And so all these actions, romantic actions, which we consider romantic or sort of facade of love, has meaning only if it's impregnated with the true essence. So yes, these feel, when someone is truly in love, they would love to do this for another person as a symbol of or as a way of demonstration of their true love. But then people also reverse the process, and they sometimes perform these actions without impregnating them with the feeling, and so this causes distortion and confusion in the partners, because the partners see the act, but they feel that there's nothing stands behind that act. So this is sort of a where there's facade without essence. And so it's very important that to understand that when there is love, there is no barrier in self-expression. There is just a flow outwards. There is no such a thing as calculation, because there is an outpour of sharing and desire to merge, because love itself has the power to attract and merge with the same essence of the other, because the other is only on the physical level. It's a physical realm when you see many people, but consciousness on the subtle level is many. And so it's a unified field of existence where its current or its power is unification. Its power of bringing souls together into merging. But to reach that level, we first have to surpass or go over the level of traumas, where we first stabilize ourselves, where we first refine ourselves by facing our traumatic experiences and dissolving it within ourselves. And then only we can understand what the true essence of love and soul merging is. So love can be seen here on various dimensions. One dimension is when you see the highest end of love, is where it represents the ultimate reality, where souls simply merge, and it has the power to attract souls from merging. The consciousness restores its different separate aspects into one unified field. And then from a different lower dimension, it can be seen as the power to invoke traumas for self-refinement, where we keep on attracting others to invoke our traumas so we can initiate the process of healing. Yet if we're not aware of what it is, we still pay attention at the facade and emphasize the external demonstrating part of relationships, where we lose ourselves and do not see the core of relationship, which is not entertainment, which is not proclaiming anything, which is actually self-healing and resolution of traumas, restoration of ourselves, restoration of trust in life, trust in ourselves through these relationships. And even if these relationships are of negative nature, learning to draw boundaries, learning to cultivate understanding of what we truly inclined for and why we are in this maybe unfavorable or negative experiences. What is it within ourselves that draws these experiences? Are we trying to repeat our early childhood situations? Are we trying to invoke our childhood home? Are we attracting something which is familiar, or something that which will either victimize us more or help us to resolve these victimized states and traumatized states? So it's very important for the society to have such education which would make people understand the actual essence of relationships, rather than seeing it as just a normality, like a random bumping, random dating, random ending up with whoever. So at the moment, relationships create more damage in the society than good, because people have no objective. Why would they, first of all, get into relationships? What's the purpose of relationships? And how to deal with relationships from within, how to observe self through the relationships, how to see the relationships as a spiritual, as a powerful evolutionary force for spiritual evolution.
Is it dangerous to even get into a relationship when we're still traumatized? Because if we can find ourselves through a relationship with other people, how do we actually do that and navigate that instead of just hiding ourselves in the relationship? Because it seems like society promotes us having this conditional sense of self. But how do we do that if the other person would have to also be on the same page, I guess? And how rare is that kind of false sense of security in a relationship? And that seems like what a relationship is for. I think many people think that that's what a relationship is for, where we can become something through someone else, but then never actually evolve and learn.
The society does not promote, the society does not make us aware what the relationship is for. And the society itself is obviously ignorant about the actual notion of relationship. What is relationship? It's either seen as a cell of the society, like a family, but no one is taught how to be in a family. So the family has become dysfunctional institution of upbringing traumatized beings. And so this is again correct, a very vivid characteristics of our day and age. But again, if we look, it's very easy here to misinterpret me and say, okay, then why would we even get into relationships at all? But this is the thing, we have to understand that this is the natural force. It's not just something that I'm analyzing. Relationships, or the power of attraction, is a natural force of the soul. This is how consciousness as an individual soul and as the collective operates. It operates through its power of attraction, where it feels such a strong pull towards a certain aspect or towards a certain experience through people or through objects or any other experience, where it the power of attraction, that sort of it's called a karmic condition, because it's, you may say, this is the power of consciousness to manifest its karmic imprints, impressions, distortions, and there is no other way. And whether you want to rationally resist it, or you want to run away and you want to uh, shun this experience from yourself, from your life, it's not going to work, because it's going to just create more imbalance. Because the point of spiritual path, let's say, or being aware of this whole phenomenon, even if you're not on the spiritual path consciously, but all of us are on spiritual path, because all of us are here just because we want to refine ourselves. So the advice here would be to consciously dive into experience. When we perceive attraction, there is something for us. It's like a key to understanding. There's something for us there. And this sort of the way we dive into experience has to be 100%. Because if we approach this rationally, we again try to control the natural flow. And in this point, this is the natural flow of manifesting our distortions. So, or maybe it's a natural flow of experiencing something unconditional for a while, and then through that, again, bringing up some distortions or understanding inclinations, or maybe directing that force for some creative work. Like, for instance, some people may have relationships which stimulate them for writing, performance, creating music, and so on and so forth. So relationships, or this feeling of attraction and the feeling of love, can be, or is, an important creative power. This is the power of consciousness itself that drives life. But how it's directed and how it's approached varies. And that's why we see that there are different notions about relationships. Some people say this is this and this is that. Love is this and love is that, because it depends on what experiences they had and how they um, learn to see it, or what they experienced within pain or pleasure, how they explain love for themselves. But love is, as I said again, it's the ultimate being. But then it goes through the prisms of our distortions or imprints, and then it becomes something that only we understand individually. But when we have these, when we experience this unexplainable attraction, we have to observe it consciously and understand what are we attracted to. And if we do some self-observation work, or we contemplate on our past traumas and so on and so forth, we can easily recognize. And so if you recognize, you will see, is this a temporary attraction, or it's something more unconditional that helps you to dive deeper into deeper, subtler aspects of the self. So sometimes relationship invokes these subtler aspects. And first it's again love and attraction, but then it again goes through different kind of circumstances where also subtler aspects of distortions or subtler issues are brought up to be refined. And so if people are mature, they just learn through these experiences maturely, and then they realize, like, if it's like a temporary experience that needs to be cherished, or it's a more long-term experience still, the most important is to dive in the experience unconditionally, so that one can really perceive what is the learning experience in that situation or in that relationship. Because if people, let's say, go into relationship half-hearted, or they have some conditions, limitations they create because of fear of being hurt, so it means that the traumas already play out, but they don't recognize them, and so they just start hiding behind again these sort of calculated actions. And these calculated actions, basically, um, they stop, or they impede the natural flow of expression, natural flow of being. And so this natural flow of being is this unconditional natural love. But once we start thinking, is it going to be like this? What if the person hurts me? What if I don't trust fully? Or can I trust? All these analytical things, they impede the flow. And obviously, what do they demonstrate? They demonstrate our, you may say caution, but sometimes it is caution, but very often it shows our insecurities, our traumatized self, even though we consider that as caution, as maybe some kind of way to protect ourselves. But this protection means we don't understand what life is. Life is there to experience it fully, so we can't protect ourselves from experiences, especially if it's something which is attracting us. Yes, we can sometimes look at the experience with caution. We can take time to assess and kind of give it an opportunity to manifest fully, so that we can decide. Sometimes we don't need to decide to fall into certain experience or to dive into certain experience. But if we decide to go for anything, then it has to be 100%, because this 100% will give us 100% feedback of why we are so drawn to that experience, or why our soul consciousness is pulled into that vortex of experience. So fear also, it's on the contrary, it's like opposite to love. But sometimes fear, in some cases, obviously it's a sign of consciousness protecting itself or trying to be cautious. But in this case, it's only about adjusting the speed with which you go into the experience. Or if you, let's say, are not sure what this all is about, you can step back and just be in stillness there and observe, and go into absorption and equanimity, where you neutralize the experience and just observe it without emotions. Because again, when I'm speaking about experiences, it's not just an emotional layer, because that's the emotional layer will be like a veil. That will be only one side of the experience. There are many, many other aspects which have to be also experienced and understood. And no experience is bad or good, it's just an experience. And our consciousness, if it's mature, has to be able to dive into experience, and to be able to detangle from the experience at any point of time. Then it may choose wisely whether it wants in the on the level of body to continue these experiences or not. Because if people are able to cultivate their own stillness, their own unconditional self, they can be in perfect harmonious relationship with whoever they choose to be with. And such spiritual, you may say, and emotional autonomy will make sure that such relationships endure time and are there for as long as they last. But very short experiences which come and die, or like they arise like waves and subside, just show that this experience was there to invoke something so that one can work with this. So, I mean, it's again, it depends on, everything varies from case to case, and every individual case has to be analyzed. And again, when we analyze from the external point of view, psychological, spiritual, it we can't see the full picture, because the full picture is that what the person experiences within themselves fully on all levels at that time when they are in the experience. And then even after the experience, they narrate it, they say, okay, I did this and that and I experienced this and that, and that's again, that's already a distortion. So no one can actually for sure know 100% what the other feels unless they are in that experience. And relationship in this case, if you are sharing your being with another person, this is the act of love and the act of merging, where there's everything subsides in that act of merging of consciousness, where consciousness appears to be in two bodies, but is perceived as one unified field, the blissful field, the equanimous field. And that's why equanimity and equanimous field can also be called as the ultimate love or unconditional love, where consciousness merges and realizes that even though it exists in many bodies, it is actually one unified field of existence.
So it seems to me that there's basically just two streams. There's love, and then there's fear, which is a rejection of love. And so fear is the external facade. Fear is what leads to the calculating and the distortions. And our whole society seems to be based on fear, which is just a rejection of love. This is my hypothesis. I wonder what you think about that. Because what I think about what remains beyond the facade, what remains beyond the calculations and the thinking and everything is love. And we just haven't discovered that because there's a layer of trauma which we haven't penetrated through yet. So we look for relationships to maybe subconsciously or in the course of destiny to solve our traumas. But can we also find a relationship based on love, or is it, or are we attracted to relationships based on our distortions?
Well, in majority of cases this day and age, we're attracted to to someone who will invoke our traumas, or someone who is very familiar to what we've known or what we brought out of our so-called early childhood home. And so what comes to fear, you may say fear, it's like we call it fear and love, but if you look at life as just the stream, so it's the our conscious ability to stop the flow. So fear is something that stops the flow. Fear is something that impedes the natural flow, right? Because love and all its supplementing features like courage, like freedom of expression, like flowing, like being, like emanating, like generosity, like just complete, you know, expression outwards, now is thwarted, if there's fear, is thwarted by this contraction of the flow. So fear is the contraction of the unconditional flow, where this emotion of, you can say fear is an emotion, but it's an actual reaction of nervous system. It's a contraction because we experienced this in our early childhood. So you may say that fear is some sort of an emotion which resembles trauma. Because if you don't talk about emotions, you just say, what is trauma? Trauma is that contraction. And again, what is also contraction is stress. So when we say we are living in the age of stress, we're actually living in the age of fear, where we constantly contract, where we don't allow this unconditional, natural flow of self-expression, and self-expression on all levels. We are not allowed to say what we think. We're not allowed to demonstrate or to act how we please, because we are limited by the society, by the law. And you see, there is this difference between natural flow and being connected with the ultimate, where there is natural morale, there is natural wisdom, where if you're given freedom to act anyhow you want, you wouldn't do anything that would harm or that would cause destruction. But the energy of contraction is of negative nature, because it suppresses the natural flow. And that's why if you give to a traumatized person freedom to do what they want, they might do harm to others, they might hurt themselves or others, they might cause anarchy or some kind of disorder in the flow of life, even in the external flow of life. And this is the difference between the wise freedom of self-expression and that freedom which is like has been, and that flow which has been suppressed and now given temporary freedom, and now it tries to express itself in a very distorted manner, where it's just like the water that the water pipe that you clogged, and now you unclog, and it just goes into all directions. The same goes with the natural flow. If you're continuously flowing in your natural being and expressing, whenever you feel like this way or that way, you express, you are there in your own being, expressing continuously in a positive, or let's say constructive way. So there is wisdom in there as well. There is harmony there. But when there is a traumatic experience, it means that flow has been interrupted, right? It has been interrupted by someone or something, where the natural response was contraction, because it's a threat. Someone shouted, someone threatened, someone hit, someone abused. So the nervous system went into a mode of self-defense, which is contraction. And now this contraction is imprinted. And now this person, for the rest of their lives, usually if they don't do any spiritual healing or self healing or any kind of work on themselves, they don't refine themselves, it stays there for the rest of their lives. And if they are faced with some kind of similar situations, or situations where they perceive that they feel disempowered, someone violated their space, someone did something that they all of a sudden stopped and contracted their natural being, natural self-expression, they go back to that little child, and their nervous system just mimics the same situation, the same experience. And this experience is not external, it's internal, it's what they feel inside. And so this is what people face. And so whenever they are faced in their working lives, like with certain threats, with competition, with situation where their self-identity or the way they perceive themselves is threatened by something, and again that they only within themselves define what the threat is. No one can say, okay, why are you scared about that, or why are you scared of this and that. It's their own response, because only they know why. But sometimes they are not even conscious, because maybe they had blocked that experience earlier, and now some experience invoke this reaction, but they don't know why they react like that. And so to know why they have to do this work, which is facing themselves again, going through the situation, contemplating without attaching the feeling to the story, without developing the story. Because let's say they could be hurt by their parents or siblings, and then in future let's say they had been hurt, and then they experienced some issue with their partner. The partner reacted the same way as their father or their mother, and so they instantly had that uncontrollable reaction of contraction and negative experience. and they don't know why they react like this to their partner, because they maybe had blocked it earlier, and now the partner simply invoked this reaction, invoked this feeling. And so they keep on attaching now this feeling to the partner. And this is how they tangle in the relationship, because the partner reminds them of their early trauma. They don't remember that, they don't know why. But then through this experience, they don't like experience, but at the same time, they get attached to the experience. So there is a dilemma of how to leave that experience, because that experience is so familiar and so much like home. And so these people get more victimized in these situations if they do not direct this understanding of the situation in the proper way, or if they don't see it as a learning experience for their further evolution, and do not dissolve this. Because the most important is to feel it without attaching it to a story, without explanation. Oh, it's because of this partner, oh, it's because of that. Even if you realize it's because of your previous experiences in the childhood, the most important is not to connect it with the story, but just to perceive and let it dissipate by itself. Because that feeling of contraction, if not impregnated or further nurtured by constant stories and new emotions, it dissipates. It dissipates because our nervous system has this ability to relax. And the more you work on it, the more you watch it without a story, and again, kind of empowering it by emotions, by fresh emotions, it dissipates. Again, you feel contracted, but next time it's less and less. The more you observe it consciously without connecting it with the story, the more it dissipates, and eventually you stop reacting to anything, because your nervous system realizes that it's over. It is just, you kind of learn it, teach it again. You reteach it to relax at the moment when it usually contracts. And so it's also important to, in these situations, to teach yourself to just, through the breath, inhale, exhale, relax, like to consciously relax these body parts which contract, or these you know, areas in the nervous system, usually solar plexus or other, which contract. Can be, if let's say in the early childhood, a person has been traumatized, let's say, always shut up, always not being allowed to speak out, not being able to tell what they feel. So such people will feel contraction in the throat. Such people will suffer. They will feel low confidence. And some people who were scared by parents, or there was some experience where they felt absolutely disempowered because they were small and fragile, and it's again, it's a inner interpretation. So that created contraction of solar plexus or lower abdominal area, or maybe even, or if they experienced some kind of betrayals, like their trust in the parent was betrayed, so they would feel this contraction in their heart and lungs, and sometimes they would feel depressed without even knowing why. Or sometimes, if their home was, a battlefield between parents, or if they constantly had some stresses, or they even were constantly dragged by parents to different hobbies, you have to do this, you have to do that. So this super activity, constant activity, do this, don't do this, do this, don't do this, could create this internal unexplainable anxiety which they carry with them into the adulthood. And then it becomes a habit. They become maybe a workaholic, or they feel like I need to perform more, or they feel compulsion to constantly act and being exalted in something, and so they exert themselves through some kind of constantly created activity. And this activity is, they create themselves this need for acting, and at the same time they feel exhausted by it, but they can't come out of the circle, because it's based on the trauma, that maybe I'm not performing enough, maybe I'm not doing enough, or you need to do this, you need to do that. So nervous system in that case just gets used to constantly perform and do. And so then people just get burned out at some point. So, and our system in general is very action driven. Our spirituality is action driven. Our healthy lifestyle is action driven. So we don't even realize how we exhaust ourselves through constant, oh, I need to be healthy. Oh, I need to mix the smoothies. I need to do this. I need to run to gym. I need to go for Pilates or yoga, I need to meditate now. And all these, again, actions just make you feel good about yourself, but it comes from ego. It doesn't come in a natural way because there is some kind of a need to be something, to become something, to change something, but it doesn't come naturally. It comes voluntarily by force. And so it eventually burns you out as well, even though it looks as if it's some kind of a healthy action or spiritual action, but after all, it's just an action. And spirituality is never about action, it's about being. And so, if you are spiritually enriched, this being, this unconditional being, this natural flow of life, which is love, also, and contentment and equanimity, whatever you call it, and God even, will be there impregnating each action, will be there through any action. And that's why it's called that being is in action, because one operates through that being. Even if one seems to do something, the being is the foundation, so it comes out of the being rather than out of compulsion, out of these all kinds of distorted waves which constantly uncontrollably arise on the space of individual consciousness, on the space of traumatized consciousness. So in this case, you can't say that again, fear and love are two separate things. They're just, one is the allowing or the free flow, and one is the impediment of the flow. And yet, okay, you can look at it as different phenomenon, but it's kind of, it's an opposite nature, but it's just one is preventive and one is allowing, one is flowing and one is stagnating. And so, but it's one and the same flow. It's like spirituality. It's life. Relationship is life. Relationships is life. Everything is life. We can't add or subtract anything from it. It's just a flow. And once we realize it, we either dive fully in it or we don't.